Again, we have two quotes. One of the ones I repeat, it's the Assange one. If wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. And the second one fits nicely after the first one. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Mark Twain. Who else could say that? Okay, I will zip through this letter. It's an article. Whether you're a passionate supporter of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, or whether you're glad he's locked up in a maximum security prison, or like most people, are only vaguely familiar with the case, you probably know that he has been labeled public enemy number one by the United States. In fact, Assange is considered a traitor for releasing hundreds of thousands of documents pertaining, now here's another mistake, to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. We're so used to Iran, Iraq, but let's just wait for the Iran war. I hope not. Plus several other troves of classified material showing governmental and corporate abuses, corruption, lying, and above all, war crimes. Currently, Assange is being held and awaiting extradition to the United States in Belmarsh, the UK's most notorious maximum security prison. If found guilty of the 17 charges under the Espionage Act and the single charge of computer misuse, his sentence could be 175 years in prison for publishing the truth. Bizarrely, the Espionage Act doesn't allow for a public interest defense, meaning that a defendant may not explain or justify his or her actions. You can't say, but we saved hundreds of thousands of lives, but we exposed this pollution, we exposed this undemocratic action. You can't explain it. And espionage acts around the world. In Britain, I think it's the Hot Top Secrets Act, the Official Secrets Act, is being amended to take away a public defense. And it's happening all over the world. Press freedoms are being constricted. Obviously, many would consider this a brazen affront to the ideas of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. At the heart of this case is the belief that it is essential that citizens in a supposed democracy are informed about what their government is doing in secret with their tax dollars and in their name. Julian Assange's final appeal to avoid extradition to the United States is set for February 20th and 21st in a London courtroom. Up to now, publishers of classified material have always been protected from prosecution under the First Amendment. If extradited, Assange may become the first publisher ever in U.S. history to be prosecuted for releasing classified information. In the Orwellian nightmare of mass surveillance and censorship that is unfolding before our eyes, killing or silencing the messenger is how the powerful respond to publishing of true information that reveals their crimes and misconduct. This cannot continue in a land that prides itself on free speech and freedom of the press. Democracy is simply impossible without an informed citizenry, no matter what political team you're on. Around 5 years ago, greatly disappointed by the public's apathy towards Assange and by the morass of misinfotainment that is today's mass media, a friend and I started Seattle for Assange, an activist group working to free Julian Assange and promote his cause of truth and transparency. We were especially angered and alarmed and surprised by the prosecution's untrue, malicious character. Some would say malicious. I was advised not to use that word. So. Malicious character assassination of Assange. Our group, like many others around the world, wanted to shine a light on mainstream media's complicity and lack of skepticism of the official narrative in this sordid affair. Suffice to say that it's been a struggle from day one. Tragically, for the reasons I just mentioned, most Americans do not realize that Assange's revelations are even more significant and extensive than Daniel Ellsberg's 1971 release of the Pentagon Papers, which showed that virtually everything the United States had been saying about the Vietnam War was a lie. Like Assange, Ellsberg's character was initially attacked and he too was subsequently tried under the Espionage Act. Fortunately, the charges were dismissed, and Daniel Ellsberg, also like Assange, became one of the most praised and honored journalists of our time. The implications for the future of journalism, as well as the precedent of convicting a journalist under the Espionage Act, cannot be underestimated. If that doesn't shake you, just think who the next president of the United States may be. Greatly moved and troubled by framing and incarceration, the incarceration of boxer Reuben Hurricane Carter, Bob Dylan in 1976 penned these famous lines in his epic song Hurricane. And they go like this: now all the criminals in their coats and their ties. Ah, Jesus. I have a note here saying, don't cry. And my wife's going to laugh at me. Okay. Okay, now I'm not going to cry anymore. All right. Okay, all the criminals in their coats and their ties are free to drink martinis. Oh, what a wimp. Okay, are free to drink martinis and watch the sunrise while Reuben sits like Buddha in a 10-foot cell, an innocent man in a living hell. Okay, sorry, Jesus. Every time I go to play that song on the guitar, the same thing happens. It's after 1,000,000 times. Why? Okay, sorry about that. Sadly, these words apply just as much to the persecution of Julian Assange. We won't stop until the charges are dropped and Julian can freely return to his wife and children. Free Assange, free speech, free press. Again, I deeply urge everyone to attend tomorrow's rally, Tuesday, September 20th at 2 p.m. in front of the Parroquia. Bring a sign. Again, I have some banners and signs. Bring a friend. Okay, again, these are sort of paper links to the articles, to some articles you can read about the rape allegations. And now I think we're ready for 3 short videos.
Sheltering in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, the then CIA director Mike Pompeo and his top officials were furious about WikiLeaks' publication of Vault 7, a set of CIA hacking tools, a breach in which the agency deemed to be the biggest data loss in its history. Pompeo and the CIA leadership, quote, were completely detached from reality because they were so embarrassed about Vault 7. Yahoo cites a former Trump national security official as saying they were seeing blood. Some senior officials inside the CIA and the Trump administration went as far as to request sketches or options for killing Assange. There seemed to be no boundaries, a former senior counterterrorist official was quoted as saying. The kidnapping or murder of a civilian accused of publishing leaked documents with no connection to terrorism would have triggered global outrage. Pompeo raised eyebrows in 2017 by referring to WikiLeaks as a, quote, non-state hostile intelligence service. The Yahoo report said it was a significant designation as it implied a green light for a more aggressive approach to the pro-transparency group by CIA operatives who could treat it as an enemy espionage organization. This is the background for where Julian Assange is today. In 2012, he got political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Think about that. That was more than 10 years ago that he has not been able to enjoy freedom. Year after year, I mean, he could have gone to Ecuador, but he couldn't step outside of the Ecuadorian embassy because he faced arrest by the British authorities. And of course, now, at the behest of the United States, waiting to extradite him here based on a more than 100-year-old law. It's clear that the authorities are not simply going to change their minds, as is always the case if you look back in history. It's up to movements making demands of the top. It's movements that make history. It is all of you. It is up to all of you. That is the only possibility of making the difference. Our motto at Democracy Now! Is go to where the silence is and say something. It is so critical that that happened today. Right now, more than 1,000 people are watching online. You can take those links at Democracy Now! And spread them far and wide. If each person sent this to 10 or 20 people or to whole organizations, this is what makes the difference. And I'll end by going back to World War II, to the White Rose Collective, to Hans and Sophie Scholl, brother and sister. She was a student at the University of Munich. He was a medical student at the University of Munich. They weren't Jewish. They were German Christians who thought, what could they do in the face of the Nazi atrocity? And they thought, well, at least if we can get out information, the Germans will never be able to say we didn't know. And so they published a series of 6 pamphlets. On the 3rd pamphlet were written the words, "We will not be silent." They spread these pamphlets out everywhere. In the middle of the night, they would hurl them into an alleyway or into a marketplace or from the atriums, balconies at their school. Just toss these pamphlets about. Hans and Sophie, their professor, and others were arrested by the Gestapo. They were charged, they were tried, they were convicted, and they were beheaded. But that philosophy, that motto, should be the Hippocratic oath of not only journalists today, but of all people of conscience. We will not be silent. Democracy Now!
Thanks, Amy and Ryan. Thanks to Progressive International for including me again. It's an honor to be a member of this tribunal. I want to do something a little bit different with my 4 or 5 minutes today. I want to speak to people who are not in this room and who would not be in this room. To people who would in fact disagree with what has been said and will be said today. To people who do not believe that Wikileaks is one of the world's indispensable journalistic organizations, and who regard Julian Assange not as a journalist, but as a chaos agent, or worse, a hacker. To people who don't necessarily believe that American empire is the greatest threat to world peace, and who see America as largely a force for good in the world. To people who see no connection between the imprisonment of Julian Assange and the vital investigative journalism they read in America's leading newspapers. To people who think Julian Assange should probably be locked up for conduct wholly unrelated to the charges in this case. In short, to most Americans, including almost every member of Congress and almost everyone who holds power in this city. I want to say that if you think that what's happening to Julian Assange has nothing to do with you, that you have no skin in this game, you are wrong. The Washington Post recently, in recent years, unveiled a slogan, "Democracy dies in darkness." It's a little bit grandiose. They've been mocked a bit for it, but can anybody doubt its truth? No government in the world willingly divulges evidence of its own misconduct. Even in democracies, we might say especially in democracies where leaders have to face voters. People in power use every method at their disposal to conceal their misconduct, their scandals, and their crimes. Every important fact we know about our government's crimes, we know because the free press published the government's secrets. The single most important role of the press in a democracy is to dig out the government secrets and to return them to their rightful owners, the public. This prosecution seeks to recharacterize that vital role as a criminal conspiracy. For the first time in our modern history, the government is describing the publication of truthful information as a felony. And if you think the government will do that once and then be satisfied, you're naive about how power works. The threat of prosecution will be in the air every time the government seeks to persuade a newspaper not to publish its classified secrets. And even if you think that's not likely to happen with this president and this attorney general, take a moment to consider who the next president and attorney general might well be. This prosecution could hand a loaded weapon to someone who views our free press as an enemy of the people. Let me close by speaking directly to the Attorney General, though I suspect he does not stream Democracy Now! Or The Intercept. Perhaps this footage or coverage of this footage will make its way to him. We know that this is a prosecution that you would not have initiated. We also know that you're an institutionalist and you don't believe that the government should change its position just because it changes its Attorney General. And I think we know that you do not want to have the historic mark of being the first Attorney General to set the precedent that publication of truthful information can land journalists and publishers in prison. Julian Assange has been in a maximum security prison for more than 4 years. Under any version of punishment, whatever you think he may have done wrong, enough is enough. And it's possible, indeed it's vital, that we find a way to bring this case to a resolution without setting a precedent that will make this country less free. Thank you.
Our next tribunal member is Marjorie Cohn. She's a professor emerita at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law. Previously, she was the president of the National Lawyers Guild. Professor Cohn has testified to the House Judiciary Committee and to military courts-martial about the illegality of the wars and the duty to disobey unlawful orders. She is a member of the Bureau of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers.
The indictment against Julian Assange, which was filed by the Trump administration, is based on Wikileaks' 2010 to 2011 exposure of war crimes committed by the United States. Assange was also indicted for exposing Cablegate. His indictment had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton and the 2016 election. In 2010, U.S. Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning provided WikiLeaks with documents containing evidence of U.S. war crimes. Those included the Iraq war logs, which were 400,000 field reports describing 15,000 unreported deaths of Iraqi civilians, as well as systematic rape, torture, and murder after U.S. forces handed over detainees to a notorious Iraqi torture squad. They contained the Afghan War Diary, 90,000 reports of more civilian casualties by coalition forces than the U.S. military had reported. And they included the Guantanamo files, 779 secret reports with evidence that 150 innocent people had been held at Guantanamo Bay for years, and 800 men and boys were tortured and abused, in violation of the Geneva Conventions and the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. The United States has ratified both the Geneva Conventions and the Convention Against Torture, making the U.S. a party to those treaties. Under the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, treaties are the supreme law of the land. That makes the obligations contained in them part of U.S. domestic law. It means the United States is bound to follow the obligations set forth in those treaties. Chelsea Manning also furnished WikiLeaks with the notorious 2007 collateral murder video. It depicts a U.S. Army Apache attack helicopter targeting and killing 11 unarmed civilians, including 2 Reuters journalists, as well as a man who came to rescue the wounded in Baghdad. 2 children were injured. After the attack, a U.S. Army Jeep drove over one of the dead bodies, severing it in half. The collateral murder video reveals evidence of 3 different violations of the Geneva Conventions and the U.S. Army Field Manual. First, civilians can never be targeted. Second, rescuers can never be targeted. And third, it is forbidden to deface a dead body. WikiLeaks also exposed Cablegate, which consisted of 251,000 confidential U.S. State Department cables that disclosed corruption, diplomatic scandals, and spy affairs on an international scale. Those documents, according to the New York Times, told the unvarnished story of how the government makes its biggest decisions, the decisions that cost the country most heavily in lives and money. A year ago, the New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, Der Spiegel, and El País, which also exposed Cablegate, signed a joint open letter calling on the U.S. government to dismiss the Espionage Act charges against Julian Assange for publishing classified and military diplomatic secrets. Publishing is not a crime, the letter states. The U.S. government should end its prosecution of Julian Assange for publishing secrets. Barack Obama's administration, which prosecuted more whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than all prior presidential administrations combined, decided not to indict Julian Assange. That is because of the so-called New York Times problem. That means they would also have had to indict journalists from major news outlets that did the same thing that WikiLeaks did. But rather than dropping Trump's case against Assange, consistent with the position of the Obama-Biden administration, Joe Biden has zealously pursued extradition and persecution. It is critical that the Biden administration drop the U.S. demand for extradition and dismiss the indictment against Julian Assange. The integrity of the U.S. government and the survival of freedom of the press require it. Thank you.
Our next member of the Belmarsh Tribunal joins us now from Berlin. Ece Temelkoren is an acclaimed Turkish author and journalist. She is the recipient of the Freedom of Thought Award from the Turkish Human Rights Association, the Pen for Peace Award, and Turkish Journalist of the Year.
Hello, my name is Ece Temelkoren. I'm here to tell you about fascism, what to do against it, and why Julian Assange is central in our fight against global rise of fascism. I've been a journalist in Turkey, and as you know, my country is now a fully formed authoritarian state. Many Western countries, until very recently, believe that fascism takes over the political power overnight. that it marches to power in goose steps. It is in fact a long and torturous process. And one of the very first steps in this process is the loss of truth. It is not an abstract phenomenon. Actually, it begins with targeting journalists and journalism and all those who speak the truth. Targeting journalism doesn't right away begin with imprisoning them or getting them fired. It begins with discrediting them first. And then, when they are defamed enough, when they have less and less people to support them, the journalists become vulnerable before the power. And that is when they are put in prison, and as in Julian Assange's case, held in solitary confinement. Alongside them, the truth is imprisoned, and that is when the authority is free to say whatever it wants and shamelessly act however it wants. As we very well know, there has been a massive global campaign to discredit Julian Assange, and his image has been painted in such a way that many people, and for a very long time, hesitated to support him. Although the tide has turned now, too long time has passed before many enough understood that the fact is Julian Assange has been targeted and made into a victim of international criminal law only because they wanted to draw a line about the truth for the others, for the other truth sayers, and how much of the truth can be told. After practicing journalism for 2 decades in Turkey, losing a country to fascism, and writing a book called How to Lose a Country that explores the global patterns of new form of fascism, I can tell you quite confidently, telling the truth and revealing the dirty secrets of the power takes a lot of faith in humans. Telling the truth while being aware of the consequences at its very core means that you believe that when enough people know about the wrongdoing, they will take action. If only they knew, you think to yourself, they would do something to change the course of events. Now, it falls on us to fulfill Julian Assange's faith in us and not let him down. Fascism, even the messy, quite colorful new form of it, when you look deep into the heart of it, is the total loss of faith in humankind and its capacity to change the world for the better. This means that if we fail the truth sayer and his faith in us, we will fail ourselves and side with those who are keeping the truth in solitary confinement, with those who think that we cannot change anything, with those the world and the humanity cannot be better. This will be our colossal moral failure. On the other hand, we will then contribute to the rise of global fascism by being silent. We are not non-factors of history. We count. And in order to prove it today, we need to stand with the truth and with Julian Assange. Thank you.